Welcome back to Views with Hughes, Agenda Free News. This is Jerome Hughes. Now, let's go ahead and get right into it. Now, it's been a while since I talked about Bob Iger. Now, Bob Iger and Disney's recent history of failures, flops, has been the talk of the news for the past day. Now, for decades, Bob Iger and Disney, under Bob Iger's leadership, were the gold standard of family entertainment, known for their kid-friendly movies, animated classics as well, and a lot of sequels. But in the last few years, Bob Iger's decisions have been pushing away the very audience that built their empire, okay, especially with the live-action remakes. Now, we've seen Bob Iger and Disney stumble over and over again with one box office failure after another, whether it's from Pixar, Walt Disney Animation Studios, or even their streaming releases during COVID. Now, today, why we're gonna see why that's been happening and how Inside Out 2 became the biggest animated movie of all time when Bob Iger and Disney decided to dial back on the woke agenda that they've been pushing. Now, spoiler alert, is not what the employees at Pixar wanted, but it's exactly what the audience has been craving. And you know what? Bob Iger's strategic shift played a key role. So before we continue, go ahead and smash the like button, share this video far wide across social media, and be sure to subscribe to the channel and click bell notifications so that way you notify the future uploads and updates. So now Bob Iger and Disney, especially under Bob Iger's influence, used to be all about making movies that families could enjoy all together. But somewhere along the line, Bob Iger started losing focus. And, Bob Iger's decisions led to movies that stopped resonating with the people who used to love them. And these are parents of today, the core customers. Now, you remember when COVID hit and Bob Iger pushed Disney to start putting movies that were meant for theater straight on the streaming, right? Well, that was the beginning of the downward spiral driven by Bob Iger's choices. Now, when theaters reopened, Bob Iger and Disney were already in trouble. They had a string of flops like Lightyear, for example, which was an absolute disaster at the box office under Bob Iger's watch. Not only was it one of the biggest failures but in Bob Iger and Disney's history, but it also sent a clear message. Families are not interested in what Bob Iger is selling anymore, okay? They're not interested in what Disney's selling anymore. And then came the movies like Strange World and Elemental. Now, even though some people tried to claim that Elemental was a success, it simply wasn't. Even my wife thinks it's good. And then he only like $600 million just break even and didn't even make it into 500 million globally, marking another blow to Bob Iger's leadership. Now, Bob Iger and Disney had layoffs left and right, especially at Pixar, because Bob Iger wasn't making the kind of money that he used to with Disney. So it was clear that something had to change and fast. Now, if Bob Iger wanted to salvage his legacy, then he had to make changes quickly, and that's when Bob Iger and Disney got really desperate. With their back against the wall, Bob Iger was banking on Inside Out 2 to be the saving grace. And guess what? I mean, it sort of saved Disney, but Inside Out didn't just succeed, but it blew every other animated movie out the water, becoming the highest grossing animated film of all time with $1.6 billion. Now, why did it do so well? Because, Bob Iger allowed Disney to make a movie that felt normal. It wasn't pushing any agenda, and it didn't have any of the baggage that Bob Iger Disney movies have been carrying for years now. Now, for once, Bob Iger is listening to the audiences, what they wanted, and it paid off in a massive way. We want to see more of these changes from this company as well. But here's where it really gets interesting, especially when you consider Bob Iger and his influence. Reports have come out from insiders at Pixar, and they're not happy. So apparently, Bob Iger and basically told Pixar to cut back on the Google elements, as y'all know, wink, wink, that have been sneaking into their movies. And that directive came straight from Bob Iger's strategy to win back audiences. And Pixar employees are throwing a fit about it. They're upset that Bob Iger and Disney didn't let them include what they've been pushing in the past. But when you look at the numbers, it's obvious that audiences don't want that stuff. A realization that Bob Iger has finally accepted, that his core audiences are the parents who used to watch these things, who don't want their children to be exposed to this kind of stuff. And you know what? Let's be real here. Bob Iger didn't make this choice, this change because he suddenly had an epiphany about what families want. This is what Bob Iger's calculated move to save the company. Nah. Bob Iger made this change because, the bottom line was suffering. Lightyear was a massive financial failure, and Bob Iger knew that Disney couldn't afford to keep going down that road. Now, the decision to tone down the agenda wasn't about making a better movie, it was about survival under Bob Iger's leadership. Now, Bob Iger and the company itself are in damage control at this point, and they know that if they keep alienating the families, they won't just lose money, they'll lose everything, including, Bob Iger's own reputation. So, what did Pixar exactly do with Inside Out 2 under Bob Iger's orders? Well, they removed the Google elements, wink, wink, that had been causing so much controversy, a move that Bob Iger fully endorsed. And sources also inside Pixar have even said that there were specific instructions from Bob Iger himself to make the main character, Riley, appear less in line with the Google agenda. Wink, wink. Now, they also made sure that Riley's relationship with Val, a supporting character, seemed as platonic as possible. Another decision influenced by Bob Iger. Now, they did extra work to edit scenes, lighting, and tone just to make sure the audiences wouldn't interpret anything as being a part of, the Google's narrative, wink, wink, aligning with Bob Iger and his new vision for the company. Now, this was deliberate, people. Bob Iger knew he had to steer the ship back on course, and that's exactly what Bob Iger did. Now, the result, the biggest animated movie ever, orchestrated under Bob Iger and his guidance. And yet, what are we hearing from inside Pixar? Complaints. A big report from IGN surfaced, and Pixar employees are whining about studio crunch, layoffs, and get this, not being allowed to push the Google agenda. A stance that Bob Iger directly opposed, and they're upset that they weren't given free reign to include what they believe should be in these movies. But the numbers speak for themselves, people. Families don't want it, and when it's not there, they come back in droves, proving Bob Iger's strategy is right. Now, what exactly is really going on here with Bob Iger and the company itself? Now, for years, Bob Iger and the company has been, making movies that push away the very people who are supposed to be watching them. Families, plain and simple. And Bob Iger Disney have been hiring new voices, new directors, and yes, even more diverse perspectives, but at what cost? Bob Iger and the company got rid of a lot of the old guard and the people who knew about how to make great movies that everyone could enjoy, and replaced them with different people who seem more interested in activism than storytelling. Now, the results under Bob Iger have been disastrous. Now, we're talking about one flop after another, layoffs and crunch conditions for employees who are now complaining that they had to work harder because they couldn't include the Google elements, wink, wink, they wanted, much to Bob Iger's dismay. Okay. Now, what's also crazy here is that these complaints are coming at a time when Inside Out 2 has proven that audiences just want good, straightforward storytelling, something that Bob Iger seems to be realizing at this point. And it's almost like Pixar employees are missing the point entirely, that they're upset that they couldn't push their agenda under Bob Iger anymore. But when they didn't, under Bob Iger's orders, the movie became a massive hit. Now, there's a clear disconnect between the creators, what they think audiences want, and what audiences actually respond to. A disconnect that Bob Iger is working hard to bridge. And the people still working at Pixar are not happy that they weren't allowed to have it their way this time around, thanks to Bob Iger and his influence. Okay, now, one of the big criticisms coming out of Pixar is directed at Pete Docter, the chief creative officer of Pixar, but it's also a reflection of Bob Iger and his broader leadership strategy. Now, Docter is being accused of sticking to traditional storytelling, a direction that supposedly aligns with Bob Iger's push to bring back classic Disney values and not bringing in enough new voices. Now, some employees are critical of Bob Iger's decision to avoid bringing in outside directors or voices, saying that Pixar has lost its willingness to take creative risks under Bob Iger's watch. But here's the kicker. Those so-called risks are exactly what's been driving audiences away, a point that Bob Iger has clearly taken to heart. Now, we've also seen this pattern before under Bob Iger's leadership, where Pixar tried to be more experimental in the wake of Lightyear, but when that movie bombed, Bob Iger quickly pulled back. And let's not forget that Lightyear wasn't just a financial failure because of a confusing concept or bad marketing. It's because they chose to highlight the Google agenda, wink, wink, in the film. Now, something Bob Iger realized too late. Now, Bob Iger and the company even briefly cut some of the content out of the movie, but put it back in after an uproar from their own staff. Now, that's the problem when you hire people who care more about pushing message than making good movies. They always put their agenda first, no matter the cost, a dilemma that Bob Iger is now trying to navigate. And this is also when you're scared of your own employees. Man up, Bob. Now, Bob Iger and Disney found out the hard way that families don't want to see the Google message in children's movies. And yet, internally, Pixar and Bob Iger and Disney leadership faced backlash from their own employees for making decisions that ultimately saved the movie. Imagine that. Making edits to make sure a movie appeals to a broader audience and your own employees get mad about it. It's like they don't even realize that their jobs depend on these movies actually making money. Now, that's something that Bob Iger understands, well, hopefully understands very well. And you know what? It seems like Bob Iger has finally put his foot down there, and the result was that the most successful animated movie of all time. Now, for years, Bob Iger and Disney have struggled with the fallout of pushing political messages that just don't resonate with mainstream audiences. And they've been dealing with one failure after another, from box office bombs to massive layoffs. Now, Pixar in particular has been hit hard with questions surrounding whether the studio could survive if the movie failed. And Bob Iger and the company were in dire straits, and they knew it. They needed a win, and they got one by simply doing what made them successful in the first place, making movies that families can enjoy without being lectured to. A strategy that Bob Iger seems to be starting to embrace fully. Now, the fact that some Pixar employees are upset about this just shows how out of touch they are with what people actually want, a frustration that Bob Iger seems to share. And it's almost like they can't see the forest for trees, and they're so focused on pushing their agenda that they've forgotten what made Pixar great to begin with, which is storytelling, creativity, and universal appeal. Now, by avoiding the Google narrative, Bob Iger and Disney managed to put out a movie that audiences loved, and it's clear from the numbers that this is the direction they needed to stick with, a path that, Bob Iger is hopefully committed to. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, what's the big deal? Why can't they just make the movies that they want to make? Well, the answer is simple, because when you're making movies for children and families, you need to be mindful of your audience, a point that Bob Iger is not emphasizing. Now, Bob Iger and Disney are learning, albeit slowly, that families don't want to have to screen movies before letting the kids watch them. They don't want to have to worry about whether the content aligns with their values. They just want to be entertained, okay? And Bob Iger now knows this. So basically, here we are with Pixar's biggest movie ever, and folks behind it are mad that they couldn't include what they wanted. But guess what? The rest of us are glad that they didn't. I mean, Bob Iger and Disney made a smart call by stepping back from the woke agenda, and it paid off in spades, validating Bob Iger and his shift in strategy. Now, if they want to keep this momentum going, then Bob Iger and the company need to remember what made them great in the first place: fun, family-friendly entertainment, and adding more creativity that doesn't come with the side of Google messaging, a direction that Bob Iger is steering them towards. And also, can we have less live-action remakes? I mean, it's not rocket science. Now, the success of Inside Out 2 proved that people are hungry for content that doesn't feel like it's preaching to them. And if Bob Iger and Disney want to rebuild the trust that they've lost with families, they need to go ahead and continue making the movies that everyone can enjoy without feeling like they're being sold a narrative. Okay, now it's a simple formula that worked for decades, and it can work again if Bob Iger and the company can just stay the course. Now, let me ask you this. Do you think Bob Iger and Disney will actually stick to this winning strategy, or do you think they'll go back to their old ways? Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. Answer these questions I just asked in the comments below. Also, be sure to include any additional thoughts you might have this particular topic. If you enjoy what I shared in this video, go ahead and smash the like button and share far wide across social media. And if you haven't done so already and you enjoyed all the content that I put out there, go ahead, subscribe to this channel. Click the bell notification so that way you're notified of future uploads and updates. Till then, peace.